Let's start talking about conflict, goals, and interests. What we hope to get out of conflicts. Conflict goals, also known as our interests, are what we want to gain from the conflict. If we're entering into a conflict or if we find ourselves in a conflict, we want to get something out of it. And we can say those are our goals, or we can just say these are our interests. These are what we generally want to get out of this conflict. Even if we might not know what our interests are, they still exist. Now, it's important because the perceptions of incompatible goals, the idea that my goals and your goals can't both be met, is the very essence of conflict, and that's why people are willing to use force and to do things that hurt other people to get what they want. But we're talking about perceptions of incompatible goals, because they're not always as incompatible as they seem like they may be. And now the conflict goals can also be either conscious or unconscious. And we're going to be talking about how some goals are a lot easier to be aware of than others, which remain unconscious, and we might not even want to admit to ourselves that we have them. Now, the acronym, the abbreviation that I want to use to help you remember the different types of goals that people have in all conflicts is TRIP. And we've got the four letters, T-R-I-P, and you can remember these four letters because they're going to be present in all conflicts. And so when you're looking for the interests of the other person and your own interests, you can kind of go down this list. So the T stands for topic, R for relationship, I for identity, and P for process. So the topic, that's what we can easily be observed in the conflict. That's the topic of the conflict. And we'll go into these more in detail. The relationship is how each party or each person in the conflict will treat and influence the other party. Identity is our need to be respected and approved of and included in light of our specific values and our background. And then our process goals involve making decisions and communicating fairly. So keep this acronym, keep this abbreviation TRIP in mind, and let's go into detail now about some of these conflict goals. First, the topic goals. Topic goals are the ones that are easy to understand. They're the ones that can be identified with questions like, what is this conflict about? What issues do we want to resolve? So these are the ones that are on the surface. Sometimes they're called surface level goals in the conflict, what we're actually arguing about. So one of the characteristics of topic goals is they're relatively easy to identify and discuss. And they tend to be a little bit more objective than other goals because we can actually express them and the other person can agree or disagree, and outside observers would tend to agree, yeah, that's what you're fighting about. Now, there's two main types of conflicts focused on topic goals, two categories of topics. One is where people want different things. For example, if my wife and I are thinking about buying a new car, maybe I want us to buy a cheap car, get an inexpensive car. But my wife, her main interests, what she's interested in, she wants to buy an unusual car that's different than typical cars. And we could argue about it. We could have a conflict, and the focus would be on seemingly incompatible goals. I could say, no, I want to buy a cheap car. She says, no, I want to buy an unusual car. Now, what we're going to look at is that the best way to find solutions is to respond to everybody's goals. So if we can find an inexpensive, unusual car, both my wife and I's and my goals will be achieved, and we'll both be satisfied with the outcome. And real life story, that's what we did, and it was just a really nice way to resolve that conflict. Now, sometimes there's conflicts based on when people want the same thing. For example, let's take a dating relationship. Suppose I was single back when I was young and things. I like a girl named Maria, but so does my friend Bob. That's going to put Bob and I in conflict because we both want the same thing. I want Maria, Bob wants Maria. We can't both have Maria. And the focus is on a seemingly limited resource. Maria is one person. She can't be dating both of us. She can't be the girlfriend of both of us. And so Bob and I are in a conflict. So there's conflicts where people want different things, and there's conflicts where people want the same thing. So those are good to keep in mind when we're talking about topic goals. Now the next category of goals and the remaining categories of goals are less visible. They're less clear on what's happening. We might not be conscious of them. The other person might not be conscious of neither their relationship goals nor our relationship goals. But relationship goals basically define how each person behaves with the other. For example, if my relationship goal with my boss, if I've got a meeting, or we have regular meetings, can I be late, or is it something that I have to be on time to exactly? Do I have to be really strict in agreeing things, or is there flexibility? Is joking appropriate? Will he be patient with me? Will I be patient with him? So relationship goals define what we want about these things. Now, maybe it's important for me to be late. Maybe it doesn't matter to me to be late. People will have different goals. Some people will want to joke. Some people won't want to joke. People have different goals. Now, another aspect of relationship goals is the amount of interdependence desired. So what areas of life and what information will be shared with the others? Will it be a lot? Will it be a little? Will it be just enough to be safe? And in the world of work, this question of what information will be shared with the other is really important. There's a phenomenon known as the mum effect, and that is when we have bad news that might interest the other person, we're really hesitant to share it with them because so often the messenger gets shot. So if I don't have a trusting relationship with my supervisor, I might know some bad news, but I'm not going to share it because I don't want to get shot, and I think that might be realistically. So that question of whether or not to discuss potentially undesired information is an important one. Another relationship goal is how much influence is expected from the other. Do I even want the other person to influence me, or do I want to keep that person in their place? That's a relationship goal. It might not be a legitimate or a moral goal, but there's lots of times where people do not want to be influenced by others. Even if the other person has really useful information or information that's more persuasive, a lot of times people don't want to be influenced or persuaded. The desire for more can lead to problems. The desire for more input, more influence from others, because that can lead to the expectation of meeting my needs. So, for example, if I'm supervising somebody and I've got all kinds of goals to accomplish, I can give more and more responsibilities to somebody and be dependent on them more than they want, and they can say, oh, I've got too many responsibilities. I don't want to be that responsible for my supervisor's success. The desire for less can also lead to problems. The need for personal freedom, getting to do everything myself, my way, rather than delegating, can lead to problems too, because I might not be able to do everything as well as I could if I were more dependent on others. So this is a summary of the first two types of conflict goals: the trip goals, the topic goals, and the relationship goals.